sexy on secular sexuality.
Hello and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show that recent polls show is significantly lacking in orgasms. We gotta do something about that, gang. As you can see, I am not Christy Powell, and Puck
I
is
am not V.
correct. We are filling in. I'm sure if you are watching this live, you probably can guess why, but Texas is kind of in the middle of some craziness. I have been informed and am happy to tell everybody that the Texas ACA crew is doing fine. Everybody's good. We've managed to contact everybody and everybody is well, but nonetheless, Puck and I are going to be filling in tonight because we are not in Texas. Unfortunately, we're in Ohio. So we're used to this weather, unfortunately.
No, and to that, the cities are more able to handle something like this. The cities and municipalities are used to handling snow and cold weather, so this is like a once in a lifetime situation in Austin where they were blindsided. But
Wow.
but it's nice to know that everybody down there is safe. And this is interesting because this is the, as far as we know, first ACA show where not only the hosts but the primary crew are all outside of Texas. So we are breaking ground here.
The ACA with no A, it's just AC.
I like that.
So now let's introduce our wonderful guest, Facebook.com/Black Female Atheist and noted free thinker, Jena. Introduce yourself.
Hello. Well, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me. Yes, I am very familiar on the ACD Discord fan server, so everyone knows me by Jena, but of course Jena Miyu is fine too. There's a lot of Jenas around, so I'm just, happy to be one of them, just one less in. So thank you for having me.
We are so happy to have you tonight and be having this discussion. First, let me do the plugs which are necessary. If you want to leave a voicemail, maybe you can't watch the show live and call in, but you still want to chat, maybe get some questions answered. The number to call is 1512-666-0ASK. Leave us a voicemail there. You can also get some really sick SecX merch at bit.ly/AEN merch. And you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/secular-sex-FG. And of course, that's our fan group. Not official, but it's our fan group. And I think all of us are in that group on Facebook, right? We can all chat with you on there. Yeah, and as Jena already brought up, of course, please check out the ACA Discord. Puck and Jena are both pretty active on there. Me, not so much, but I am on there occasionally, and we'll all be there tonight after the show for an after show. So if you maybe wanted to talk to us here and we don't get to your call tonight, or just want to chit chat, ask some questions, please feel free to join us on Discord after the show. And if you want to call the show tonight, please call us at 512-991-9242. Or if you want to use the internet, use tiny.cc/callsex. So, the topic tonight, which I am so pleased to be talking about. I think this is a fascinating topic.
I agree.
Yeah, we're talking about Black purity culture tonight. So, we're talking about sexuality that is specific to the Black community. Of course, we're talking about the American Black community. We're talking about what we know about.
Right.
So what is purity culture from a Black perspective, as far as you know? Because we know this is a Christian thing, but are there differences that are specific to the Black community in your experience, Jena?
I would say there is. Growing up, I won't say born, but I was raised Christian in a Christian household. I am myself identify as a closeted atheist. So anyone outside of the sphere of the internet does not know that I am atheist. But with the experience I have grown up on, what I have been told and taught from family and church family, I guess you could say, there is just this heavy strain of, or I could say heavy rule, which is not too much far pulled from the Christian Bible, is that remaining pure or remaining abstinent before until you're married is like heavily driven, especially for the Black community or Black culture. So, you know, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, Rudy, in your past, but I know with my own, and I never even went through this kind of ceremony. It was something called like just exchanging or giving your young teen daughter purity rings, which is essentially very odd because I never saw this for guys. I think they had a different kind of special ceremony, but my sister, who is a few years older than I, had went through this type of ceremony to where you know. Uh, Take a vow with your parent or parents in front of the whole entire congregation, and you pray and have this kind of dialogue to where when you take a vow and oath saying you will remain sexually pure or abstinent until you are married with your husband, and of course the heavy strain on it being a heterosexual marriage. So, and I know, in my experience, or at least from what I have learned from friends, there have been other forms of this type of purity ring exchange ceremony to where it could be kind of, I don't know. I don't want to too much express it because I'm not too familiar. But with this exchange of the ring is that you're vowing to keep yourself pure and waiting until that thing where you're creating this false dichotomy of, oh, if I remain sexually abstinent, then I'll have this perfect marriage and I'm doing this under the eyes of God, and everything beyond my life once I'm married and have my husband to take care of me and my household, everything would be great. And you're fed this false vision for yourself, um you know and you're at the same time with that false vision, you're not fed the appropriate knowledge of sexual education. So it's just a lot of dynamics that surround all of that.
Definitely. I can definitely see that. This whole purity ring thing, that's really interesting. I've heard about select cases of that, not just
Hmm.
within the Black community, but that that isn't something I have seen or heard a lot of growing up as a Jehovah's Witness,
Mm.
because I guess it's kind of just assumed that the purity is assumed, because if you don't stay pure, then you're just not a Jehovah's Witness. Like, you'll be disfellowshipped. So a vow of chastity is kind of redundant in addition to just being baptized. It's kind of included. It's a package deal, so I guess that there's never really been any need for the
Hmm.
additional purity signs. But I wouldn't be surprised if I had had some friends growing up who had things like that: purity, chastity rings, that type of thing.
Right. Yeah. I it's so funny because I never, I guess, got the appropriate chance to go through this type of ceremony, but as for myself, I'm not a virgin, and neither is my sister. Neither my sister and I are married, and so, but my sister will be married later on this year. But it's so funny how um or at least in the perspective of my family, that they held on to this tradition or belief that should be abide by, because you're looked upon as someone that is virtuous and strong and can detract yourself or detach yourself from any type of sinful sexual desires or thoughts. And so when you uh, have yourself when you remove yourself from that and involve yourself in sexual activity, then the change of, or I should say the wrong word is prejudice, but the the hurtful language that you're met with, and especially if you have a child out of wedlock, it's they almost, I have seen some disownership, but also more aggressive, religious hugging, if I can put it lightly. And I say that in which they just overcrowd you with, oh, we need to get you in faith groups, we need to get you this kind of help that's, faith involved and covered in Jesus and all over that stuff. And that just further drives the indoctrination that you cannot successfully survive and not be a adequate or appropriate person because you've already sullied yourself, and plus you've had a baby out of wedlock, so now we need to purify you all over again and put you under this blanket of God, and it just further constrains you in that light. And the other flip side is when I see older women, especially in the Black church, where if they happen to lose a spouse or that spouse is divorced from them or however that happens, they continue to live this life of celibacy and without the prospect of even really remarrying or not. And I'm like, wow, that's really debilitating because you're supposed to, on the outside, have this picturesque view of a virtuous, a strong woman that, will not lean on those sinful desires. And I just find that just really sad. And it's no wonder that there's such a underrated percentage of depression that goes along with older Black females. And I'm
Do you
not saying
think
it's because you're without sex, but just the mere fact that that's honed in is part of it.
Do you think that sort of very strong pushback and sort of like there's a stigma of hypersexualization that surrounds Black women? If that's something you didn't already know, surprise, surprise, that is the case.
Whoa.
Do you think that that's sort of a pushback against that to be sort of hyper pure, hyper celibate in these sort of godly puritanical Christian circles?
I want to say so. And I, through my own knowledge, because I am a nurse, so I have some medical background and some idea and understanding that with different ethnicities, different body types, even some mature faster than others. I myself hit puberty, or, I will say lightly, hit puberty at the age of 10, and I matured a lot quicker and appearance wise looked more mature than my age, especially once I hit 6th grade, which was like 12 years old. So the fact that Black young girls and that mature into Black women, they develop consistently more earlier and faster than other ethnicities. So when you see that and then you put religion on smack down on it, it makes sense why there's such a strong hold on, hampering down, like, okay, we have to lock you into this vow of celibacy before you can be touched, or or it has to be appropriately with this said person of that same faith in order for it to be righteous, or in order for it to be seen as appropriate. But
that is
good. No, that's pretty much it.
I find that really interesting because it's like, just because a child is physically developing faster doesn't make them stop being a child any sooner, but they're, from an earlier age than girls of other ethnicities, you're being sexualized. You're seen as potentially a sexual being at a much younger age for no other reason than being curvier, just naturally. Do you have any input or questions on this, Puck?
Yeah, I do, but see, I am remaining silent on purpose because this is the Puck listens and learns episode, right?
Well, you can't
Because
listen the whole time.
no, but I'll give you my thoughts
We
on
won't do
this
that.
because, I grew up in a Filipino household in a Filipino community, and I'm hearing a lot of mirrors to this. Just like Rudy was saying about the purity rings and the purity pledges, it wasn't something that you had to do because it was something that was kind of built in. It was just kind of assumed. And so what's one more promise on top of something that's already assumed anyway? And in the Filipino culture that I grew up in, it's very difficult to separate the Filipino part from the Catholic part, because just about everything that we did and everything that we knew, it revolved in some way around something that was church related also. So it's interesting for me to hear some of the parallels. And like my one story was that I had a young female relative who at the age of 15 had been discovered with a guy, and that's fine. But what her parents decided to do was have a counseling session, not with a family counselor or anything, but with the priest in the archdiocese, to come in, invite them for dinner to have a talk about why it's very important to remain chaste. So I'm seeing some interesting parallels, and I've never really thought about how different ethnic groups and racial groups deal with sexuality. And this is why this episode is super interesting for me, because it's making me look back at my own past and wonder how much of where I was brought up, the way I was brought up, was because of a cultural tradition, and how much of that was based on religious tradition.
Yeah. Even
So
drive- yeah.
this is super fascinating to me. I'm full of questions, but I'm sure you've got plenty to talk about.
Right. Even driving home the point for me in my experience, because there came a time I lost my virginity when I was 18, and there came a point in time, sometime a little after that time, a couple of years after that, that I actually expressed to my mother that I did have sex, and what I don't know. It was my way of trying for us to kind of grow and bond or whatever. And, years later, even though she was, heavily disappointed, it wasn't said that nicely, but anyway,
Yeah.
as recent as just maybe a few months before the pandemic hit and all churches were not allowed to kind of have congregation and everything, I sat in my Sunday school with my mother and my sister, and they were kind of having this kind of discussion about women and, dialing back to Adam and Eve and all that. And, pretty much emphasizing the need and being necessary for being abstinent. And then my mother just, proudly like sat up in her chair and expressed like, I am, and I'm kind of almost saying this word for word. She pretty much said to the whole room of 30 plus people, I am so proud that my adult daughters have remained pure and until they find their significant male significant others or whatever. And, I kind of side-eyed and looked at her. I'm like, is to be so blatantly lie and say that just to, keep up the appearance that her two adult daughters are, unmarried, still have their purity. It's just,
Purity.
It blew my mind, the significance of how big of an importance this is. I'm like, who the fuck cares? But that also dials into other things about, sexuality with Black people, especially when it comes to, homosexuality, polyamorous relationships, which I have very little knowledge of, and even if that is the most prominent thing in Black culture. But it's just scary that it's just such a stronghold, with the added notion that sexual education when it comes to Black parents and their kids is almost non-existent.
Yeah, that is something that I didn't experience a lack of sexual education, but I think that is because there is a very strong emphasis within the Jehovah's Witness community, at least, of if you don't teach your kids about sex, the world will. So I had something of a sex education. It wasn't super thorough. It certainly didn't teach me how to have sex, but it taught me pretty much everything up to that. And of course, I knew what contraceptives were. I knew how they worked, but that was stuff I mostly learned from the internet. They just didn't stop me from learning it from the internet.
Right.
So
See, you're lucky. You had the internet. I had the Encyclopedia Britannica. So when like the talk with me was going through the encyclopedia and the human anatomy section in there, and having a very clinical description of the parts. And this happened when I was quite young, like in early grade school. Just, this is the mechanics of the birds and the bees. And then the only other conversation that I had about that with my parents was sometime, I think I was about 12 or 13, and the basic gist of it was, you're gonna want to, but don't. And that was like the beginning and end of the conversation. But one thing I wanted to ask you, Jena, was you were talking about a lot of this from a female perspective. But one thing that I noticed about the difference when I was growing up, like when my parents found out that I had sex before marriage, it was kind of seen as a disappointment, but not a huge deal was made about it. But the same could not be said for my sister, who when they found out, there was a lot more of a stir. So is there anything you've got about the difference between the ways that young women and young men are treated as far as purity culture?
Oh yeah, definitely. I have no well, I do have half brothers, but we're not close. But as far as immediate siblings, it's just my sister and I. So I don't have an immediate like brother that I visually saw the difference between, the sex talk or education for us versus them. But yes, like I had mentioned, I don't recall there being any type of ceremony growing up in church where the young boys in that church had that same type of ceremony as the girls did. So there obviously is a sexist emphasis on really tapping down on the girls, like you're the trouble. You need to, take care of it and not allow these, hooligans to mess up and put something in you. And
if I could add to that, I think that it's not even just sexism against women, but there's also a very toxic culture of toxic masculinity within the Black community. And getting laid is masculine. So even though you're not supposed to, if you're a pure Christian man, you're not really going to get as much flack for it either. Because, well, you're supposed to,
Right.
There's I think that a lot of the, maybe not a lot of, but definitely some of the problems with, restrictive sexuality within the Black community has its roots in toxic masculinity, specifically toxic Black masculinity, the concept of what makes a Black man a man.
Oh, absolutely. Like just how aside from how society views a man and a woman, it's even more toxic, just as you said, Rudy. It's even more toxic in the Black culture too, because we're Black people are already viewed as lower, as oh, if a man is not in a home, then that home is just already a mess. And it's almost stereotypical that a man always leaves their family, or never has a job, or never can hold a job, or never can take care of their family, yada yada yada, which also propagates the whole strong Black woman is the head of the household type deal, and that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, the idea that a Black man is not subjugated to the same type of treatment as a Black girl is when they grow up, as far as sexuality is concerned, but they hold them at a different double standard. And that double standard clearly being, the basic double standard is, a guy sleeps around with a bunch of girls, they're seen as a player, versus a woman that sleeps around with a bunch of men, they're seen as a whore. And so unfortunately that it's the same type of idea I see in that Black Christian culture, but it's just said nicely, or said in a nicer way.
So I hear a lot of conversations about how young women are taught that their bodies are objectified by young men, and like if something happens, you'd like, if you show too much skin, then a boy's not going to be able to help himself and stuff like that.
Mm.
Now, coming from the male perspective, and again, I speak only for myself on this one and my experiences growing up, but it was
Please.
never like explicitly taught to me. Like, it's like those girls are going to try to get you and they're going to try to, it wasn't that specific. It was more a sense of like the world is going to try to get you to break your purity and to break your,
But there are girls in that world.
but there are girls in that world. Yes. And that's but they so it's interesting to hear that it's framed so differently for the way young men are taught and the way young women are taught. This is a good learning experience for me. I'm glad I'm here.
Yeah, I will say another example just and recently in the last few years, it's always in my Sunday school, always. It's just the most toxic. I have my troubles with them, but my actual one of the facilitators, he's just this proud, big, tall black man. He and often his wife is there present too. He has consistently has mentioned that it's not his fault that his eyes are trained to look upon a beautiful woman as they walk by. I mean, obviously the woman knows what she's doing when she wears that dress or walks that way or puts on all this makeup or flips her hair or whatever. And I'm just like, that's the same propagated notion and idea that any sexist man would have. And you're automatically placing that blame on that woman for just going about her day, but you just happen to look at her and he's like, well, she knows what she's doing. That's why I can't, don't fault me for looking at her butt. She happened to just walk by with her butt out like that.
Yeah. Like she has a butt. How can I not look at it? The butt's there.
Exactly. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's, yeah, I have seen and heard a lot of that kind of stuff. It's yuck.
Yeah.
Do we want to take some calls, Puck?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do it. Let's take the first one here. Bjorn.
Oh shit.
Hello, Bjorn. How you doing? You're on with Rudy, Puck, and Jena. Yes, you're on.
Hi.
What did you want to talk about, Bjorn?
I'm not the insurrectionist one. I'm the opposite of that.
Say that again?
At what point does religious tolerance become dangerous? That's what I want to ask.
I want to try to make sure I'm understanding your question. Do you mean that allowing religious groups to exist and to have the kind of values that they would choose to have, how much does society allow groups like that to exist and to talk about their values?
Exactly.
Okay.
Because like I come on this channel because I'm like extremely transcendentalist, but at the same time, how do you ethically excuse an attempt at an insurrection? And on this, wait, no, yeah, you asked me a question. Hold on.
Take it back.
Yeah, take your time. We got it.
Yeah.
As nervous as you are calling, we've all been nervous being on a call-in show for the first time. So we're right there with you. Take your time.
I took some anxiety medicine right before going on air. So
this is full of orange soda. We're all doing what we need to do here. So help me understand a little bit more about what you're trying to ask. I think I got it, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
So like, all right. So many things are so stupid and so simple to fix. First off, how is abstinence, like purity culture, right? How is abstinence only education legitimate? It's oxymoronic in name. Oh my God.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with you that abstinence only education is detrimental to what you want to accomplish. But at the same time, it'd be very difficult for me to argue against the idea that if someone does want to wait until a significant part of their significant milestone in their marriage before they have sex.
Yeah.
Like, that's their choice. That's their choice. And if a group of people decide that they want to do this and want to hold each other to their promise, I don't really have too much of a problem with that. If you don't want to have sex for whatever reason, great. I think the problem that I have is when they try to turn it into legislation, or to try to turn it into the idea that anybody who doesn't follow this is by definition immoral, like the people out there in the world. So choosing to do it for yourself and choosing to be in a group that will help you keep your commitments that you choose to make, I don't really have a problem with that, other than I probably wouldn't join that group. But it's, to me, the only time it crosses a line is when they try to either try to encourage, not even encourage, how do I want to say this? When they try to insist that they have some sort of advantage or benefit because they are more pure, and try to make the rest of the world look bad, kind of as a recruiting measure, or if they are trying to limit how much other people can have access to information, that they want to do their own research. That's where I would draw my line. What do you guys think?
I agree with you, Puck. I think that the line is definitely at restricting other people from doing what you don't want to do. You know, I think that it's been said plenty of times. I'm not going to say it like it's original, or I'm going to say it any better than anybody else. But, you know, the point where sort of your freedom to do whatever you want ends is when it starts being to the detriment of other people. So if you don't want to have sex until you're married, fine. Don't. You don't have to. No one's gonna make you. But you can't just say, well, I don't want anybody to even know how to do it because I don't want to do it. That makes no sense. The problem is, as far as legislation goes, even though that seems perfectly fucking obvious when you say it out loud like that, that's not how Christian nationalists think. And a lot of them are in government or voters. So they just vote for, well, that's what I want to see more of. I want to see less people having sex before marriage. So I'm okay with abstinence-only education, not really considering that not everybody wants to live a biblical lifestyle, and it's not necessarily beneficial for everybody to live a biblical lifestyle. That's just not what they're thinking of, even though it seems obvious to us.
Yeah, I'm even fine with talking about the advantages of choosing, say, abstinence until marriage. There's a lot of benefits to it, and there's a lot of good reasons why someone would want to choose that. And if a group wanted to advocate for that and say, these are the reasons why we think it's a great idea, that's cool. But one thing that religion tends to do is to speak for the other side as if they know what they're talking about. And they say something like, those atheists over there, they have no moral compass. They're just going to do whatever. But we are the moral ones. We know what's right because we have objective morality on our side. So it's the other point is when you're starting to vilify the other side and speak for them instead of allow the other side to present their case also.
Right. Their mentality is, well, God didn't just create us Christians. He created all of us. So when he says this is best for y'all, it's best for everyone as far as they're concerned.
Back to the point of religious tolerance being dangerous, and more specifically, the cognitive dissonance involved with nationalist Christianity. Forgive me, I'm not a Christian, but I can play the part of an apologist here. How do you glorify a vain, arrogant, xenophobic, greedy, etc. dude with a guy who is all about the opposite?
I get what you're asking, and that's starting to kind of, stretch the confines of the show and the subject matter of the show. But I see where you're coming from, and I do see a lot of the contradictory. I don't quite understand it. And there are a lot of things about that we can get into, but I'm going to try to steer in a different direction for the sake of this show, though. Yeah. Jena, what are your thoughts on how much we should tolerate religion and religious teachings?
I
given the fact,
oh no, go ahead, boy.
I don't know who is it. It's my own gender dysphoria and just being able to be comfortable in public, which is impossible. But at the same time, I'm completely comfortable in my autistic masks because I've got both. Oh shit! I don't know if that's even within the realm of where I am.
You're fine. You're fine.
You're fine. No, I was just gonna say, just kind of diving back, how much should we tolerate the religious aspect on, sexuality and stuff? Because there's some good. Well, this is even hard for me to say, but there, for me, as far as the medical, with my medical perspective cap on, I can't rightfully accept or find good in the whole abstinence only, celibacy only until marriage type idea. Obviously, personal choice, that's fine. But when you are given that firm restriction on your life without the proper sexual education to back it, then that's where I just raised my hands and was like, okay, this is not good, because there is two, rates among Black women as far as abortion rates and unintended pregnancies are a lot higher, way a lot higher. And so amongst any other group, and then right after that is the Latino community. So when you have the stronghold on Christian-backed abstinence-only teaching, you're doing a disservice in relaying misinformation of medical knowledge to them, or lack thereof. I can say for certain that my parents did not give me any type of sex talk. The sex talk I got was just don't bring home any baggage, aka don't bring home a baby. That's it. The sex education I got was whatever type of sex education they ran in 5th or 6th grade for me, and the internet. That's it. And then eventually when I got into nursing or, biology in school and all that stuff, and through, people and friends and stuff. But from my parents and from the church itself, no, nothing about contraceptive education, nothing about, safe sex. To just, because it's kind of like that play when you're saying, oh, don't do this, but you want to go against societal rules and be like, oh, I'm going to do it anyway, and then you find yourself in trouble. It's the same thing. When you put a firm restriction on someone to say don't do this, and they go about doing it anyway unsafely, or they get hurt, or abuse occurs, or what have you, then you have these propped up unintended instances where a person is forced to either abort or have to keep this child that they have no means of taking care for, and be damned that the government or society is going to help you taking care of that child too. So it's just a lot that goes around with the faith-based abstinence only programs. It's just the harm in them saying all of that, or not teaching any type of sexual education behind it.
Well, Bjorn, we appreciate your call. Thank you very much. We got to move on to some other callers, but we really appreciate you giving us a call and asking those questions about religious tolerance.
Matrilineal heritage.
You know what? Try to take some time to formulate that, and we got to move on. But please, if you want to put something together about that and give us a call next time, we can talk about it. But for right now, let's move on. Let's talk to Mel Elder from Australia. Mel, how are you doing today? Hello, Mel.
I wanted to talk about... Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, you got me? Yep.
Yes, yeah. What would you like to talk about?
I wanted to talk about what you were talking about to do with the purity culture. I'm an atheist, but I was brought up in a Christian family. In fact, my father is a retired Uniting Church minister, like a pastor. And I was taught this real big purity culture. In fact, my sister and I were told if we got pregnant, we'd be booted out of our home and they'd never talk to us again. So it created a really big, huge, enormous problem when we were first having sex. I mean, and there was all this sort of also talk about, like if women got sexually assaulted or raped, that how it was their fault, which was really problematic for me because, like, from the age of 4 up to about the age of 16, I was sexually assaulted by members of the congregation and the elders of the church. So my first time having sex, I was really, really messed up, and it didn't go well. I mean, to this day, I have a psychologist and a psychiatrist. I have PTSD, but it caused so many problems. That's why I am so against this purity culture, because it creates harm, so.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't imagine how that must have affected you. And obviously, you've said it yourself. You've needed plenty of psychological help as a result. And I would imagine that if your upbringing had been a little bit more sex positive, if you'd had a better sex education than don't, you might have been able to, at least as I don't know what the situation with you as a child was, but I have heard lots of instances of people getting abused as a child and not knowing what was happening, or not knowing that they were supposed to say no, or even instances where the kids didn't know the proper names for their genitalia, so they could not communicate what was happening to them effectively. Like, they couldn't even say what was happening.
I mean, in my case, I knew what was happening, but I didn't think I'd be believed. I actually thought, and I actually remember thinking this is, even when I was so young the first time at 4 years old, that my parents must have known, because they handed me to those people for them to look after me. So I thought my parents must have known. They must have been in on it, and that was just what I was expected to do. Or I thought if I said anything, I would be believed. And this was sort of compounded. When I was 11, I actually had a complete stranger sexually assault me. First time anything happened that was not based in the religious people. And I told my parents at this time, and then the police and my parents blamed me for it. And you can imagine that as an 11-year-old child thinking, I was really messed up by that. I mean, I've had, like, when I was an older teenager and all through my life, I've had multiple, like, suicidal attempts because I just felt like such a piece of shit because I was blamed for something that I had no control over, So, that made it a whole hell of a lot. But I knew what was happening. I just didn't think I could say anything, which made it worse, I think.
Yeah, that is so awful. And I think that we can all agree that in a much more sex positive, sex education positive world, that kind of thing would happen significantly less, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah.
Because there isn't this emphasis on, I even at such a young age, the idea that a child could be seeking sexual attention from a stranger is absurd. It's absurd. But with a purity culture mindset, especially one that is biblically based, it follows that might be the mindset that somebody might come out of that with. And that's just so fucked up. I don't have any other way to describe that.
No, and one of the other harms in this also, you were talking about how you might find it, you thought that others wouldn't believe you because for whatever, but there's a lot of cognitive dissonance that goes on when someone who is seen as an upstanding figure in a community gets accused of something horrendous. Right. And there's a lot of mental blocks that people put up to say, no, they couldn't possibly do anything like that. They're a man of God, and they are willing to do anything, including apparently throw kids' testimonies under the bus in order to maintain that image of this person being that pure person that they want everyone to think they are. And yeah, this is one of those harms also of purity culture, the idea that someone is so pure that they are beyond even considering accusing them of this. How could you even think that they could do something like this when they have shown that they are so holy and that they are so pure?
Yeah.
So I feel for you. That hurts and that hits right here.
Yeah.
Thank you
And-
for sharing with us.
I agree, because like I've got 4 adult daughters. I've got 4 daughters who are now adult, but from the age of 4, I taught them comprehensive sex ed, and I said to them repeatedly that no one has got the right to touch your body, not even me. You have the right to say no. So I told them straight out, that if somebody touches you, you tell me, I will deal with it. I'll call the police. I'll get something done. I told them they have the right to their body, and I said to them as they were growing up as teenagers, I said, if you want to go on the pill, I'll take you to the doctors, no questions asked. I said, if you turn up and you rock up with an STD or you're pregnant, I said, you know what? I'm not going to judge you. I'm just going to love you and be there to support you in whatever you want to do. I made it very clear, and I said to them that nobody, even people in authority, don't have that right over you. Because I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional.
No.
I'm really sorry, but I didn't want
You are
any of
just
them to
fine.
suffer.
Understandable. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't want any of them to suffer like I suffered, and I don't want that for any other person. I don't care what their gender is. I don't want any other person. This is why I hate purity culture, and I am fighting it with everything I've got in me, because I don't want no other person, nobody should ever have to go through feeling ashamed if someone sexually assaults you, or if you want sex, if you want to have sex, you shouldn't feel ashamed of that. If it's consensual and there's enthusiastic consent and, everyone's all good, then whatever you want to do with your body, it should be your decision. It should not be anybody else's. And I hate the fact that there's a group of people that are trying to control what people do. And so that's why I wanted to call in, because I just really relate to what you were saying. You guys are wonderful. And I'm sorry, I'm really...
No,
Don't
we
be sorry.
appreciate you
Don't be
calling. This is
sorry.
great.
It is-
And we're glad to hear. I'm glad to hear. I
Yes.
shouldn't speak for anybody else. I'm glad to hear that you're taking such proactive steps with your daughters and your family and teaching them
Absolutely.
about, you don't even get a hug from a family member unless you say it's okay, and that's a wonderful thing. And the other part of that you said that really hit home for me is that no authority should be beyond being reported, right? Even if somebody is a authority member in a church or a teacher or anything, nobody has that kind of authority over you. And it's nice to hear that you're willing to stand by them if they have something to say about that to you. So thank you
Absolutely.
for being one of the steps in the right direction.
I've already done that. Like a couple of years ago, I had, like, before, I'm an atheist now, but when I was still a Christian, I was in the Salvation Army Church, and there was a young girl, 20 years old, who was a single parent, and her father had raped her. That's how she had the baby, right? That's she had the child and kept it, but her father was the father of her baby. But the male chaplain of the Salvation Army Church was sexually abusing her. And I told the church members, they knew about it and didn't want to do anything about it, which made me so angry. So rather than wait, because they all knew, and they all knew what he was doing to this girl, and they were just, going, who cares? And apparently this guy had done it to other young girls, so I went and reported it to the police, and I made sure that there was some kind of police act, because I said, this guy was a repeat sexual offender, so nobody else was going to do anything. I saw it and I stepped in, but because I saw this girl being, young woman being sexually abused, and after her father sexually abused her, and she had a kid by her father, which is fucked up. But I mean, I stepped in and called the police. So I go out and, like, on the internet and talk to other young women, and if I hear stuff like that, I will report it to the authorities. Or other young men or young people of non-gender specific, I won't let anybody else. I view this as my purpose in life is to stop this from happening to other people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that is, Mel, honestly, you are awesome. It is amazing to hear about you sort of breaking this cycle of abuse and being proactive in helping other people in that situation. That's amazing. You're awesome. You're amazing. You're getting lots of love in the live chat. and plenty of love from us because you're awesome. Thank you so much for calling in. And before we move on, I would be remiss if I did not mention, you brought it up right away. You got the psychological help that you needed, which is so important to victims of abuse. I'm sure you would say that. Yeah, I'm sure that you would.
You know, I've got PTSD, so well, you know, so I would get ongoing help. But I love you guys, and thank you so much. What you've been saying today has actually really helped me. So thank you. You know, thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
calling
Mel.
in.
Thank you for calling.
Yes. And
yeah,
I'm
I know. Sorry, just
go for it.
Yeah,
Rudy.
just real quick, I wanted to say, if you are watching this, if you have had trauma like this or any other problems like this in your life, Secular Therapy Project. Look it up. Go there, seculartherapy.org. You will be able to find a therapist, a professional, a mental health professional, that's the word I was looking for, who is not going to inundate you with religious dogma. They're not going to give you any of that crap. And as somebody who has seen a secular therapist, just having somebody acknowledge your religious related trauma and not try to fight you on the religious aspect of it, it's huge. It's a huge relief. It is incredibly important. Please, if you need therapy, go to seculartherapy.org, seek help. I just felt like that needed to be plugged.
No, you took the words out of my mouth. Yeah.
So bringing this back to the subject of today's show, are there some authority figures in Black purity culture that are seen as kind of above reproach? Does it seem? Are there people who it seems like they if you accuse them of something, the initial idea is it couldn't possibly be that person?
Bill Cosby.
Yeah.
Every
So
major black
tie this in
pastor.
for us, Jenna.
Yeah. Every major non-female pastor, preacher, bishop, who have you, that has, a prominence and a face and a stance at the pulpit, all of those guys, each one of them that you would directly like if they were accused of something and it was on a hush hush, or the congregation, or that reverend pool or pulpit of men keeping it hush hush, and then if that word got out, then of course that so and so would never do such a thing. That person must be trying to get money out of them, or lying, or whatever, trying to get something. Classically.
I have also noticed, and I noticed it specifically with, what I was talking about earlier with Bill Cosby, but there is a mentality in the Black community of like, well, we have to protect our own. We have to stand up for our own. To the point where if a Black person, usually a Black man, gets accused of something like that,
R. Kelly.
of R. Kelly, oh my goodness. I saw a documentary about that. That was just ugly. Gross. But it's like they just want to back him up just for the sake of, well, he's a brother. I don't want to, we get lambasted as a community by everybody anyway. We can't let him get thrown under the bus for this, even if he did it. They just come up with whatever excuses, and it's tribalism. It is. And it's
No, somehow, yes, like there is this idea that, every other everyone else outside of the Black community is like looking at us like we're just the worst of the worst. So we always have to speak and hold up our own no matter what. And I firmly disagree with that, because if we see a Black man, i.e. Bill Cosby, i.e. R. Kelly, i.e. Michael Jackson, i.e. all of those people that have done some sexual harm or some harm in general against another person, yet we're like, well, we don't want to see another Black man in jail. Well, I mean, I understand the sentiment, but I don't agree. And it's disgusting to even allow or continue to allow said person to just continuously get away with that. And they still continuously exhibit those disgusting things that they are been accused of for years now. And
Especially when the people that they usually hurt are Black women. I mean,
yeah,
that's still hurting your own. That doesn't.
right. Right. Where's the line?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh. God, I could go on about that for a while.
I know.
Okay, so one thing that was in your notes that I wanted to ask about, because I see this in a lot of other communities also, is the tendency for high purity culture groups to marry earlier than usual, possibly for the wrong reasons or to the wrong person, and to try to maintain the relationship for longer than is probably a good idea.
Yeah.
What thoughts do you have on the stigma around singleness?
Well, this is it kind of hits home because I remember recalling kind of having a similar conversation as far as regards to divorce and things like that. But just with my sister, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought briefly, but I struggle with this because there seems to be a non-belief in divorce when it comes to Black culture. Like, no matter what type of issues or trauma or there have you
You
always have
stand
to
by your man.
stand by exactly stand by your man no matter what. And I recall having this conversation with my sister. Mind you, she's getting married soon. And not to say that I have issue with the guy she's marrying. Love him. He's like a brother to me. He's a great guy. But I asked her point blank, like, and they've had like a fight in the midst of that moment. I asked her, if you feel that you're unhappy now and you're having struggles now, like, how are you going to be when you guys are married? Like, I wouldn't want you, because that's my sister, I love her, I wouldn't want you to hang on to this relationship if you're going to be depressed and upset or harmed in some way. Not at all implying that there would be any physical harm, but emotional harm is just as detrimental too. And she point blank said, well, I don't believe in divorce. Like, I mean, that's just another something about statistic or whatever. And it just flew out of my head, or flew over my head. But when saying that you'll stand by your man, as you said, and cling on to this relationship no matter the abuse or the turmoil that happens around it, is scary. And that's something that is firmly driven with the belief, Christian belief, that divorce is not a thing, or should not be a thing. And marrying, as far as marrying young, I don't have too much direct experience with that, but I know that is certainly something that has been not necessarily a custom, but is a thing. But marrying within your own and making sure that that man is just as godly as you are, or is a godly person, um, continuing that cycle and sticking with your own. And that's something I've had a heavy problem with, because to my family, I've been classically known to date and have relationships outside my race. And obviously in some circles under the Christian Black culture, marrying or being outside your race is kind of like a slap in the face to say, like, oh, what's wrong with Black men? This is why Black men are seen so negatively. And it's funny how a Black woman would get that conversation, but when a Black guy goes outside their race, it's kind of like a good thing, or they're still the double standard.
That
But
he's
anyway.
marrying up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's
No,
marrying up.
I have heard my mother, who is not Black, has told me some of the stories that she didn't hear directly, but somewhat overheard. She grew up in a very mixed congregation. She and my dad both did. They went to different congregations, but they met at the same Kingdom Hall, the same church. So they had a lot of the same people that they ran around with. And he was just a star Jehovah's Witness young man. So of course all the older black ladies in his congregation were just looking forward to seeing who he was gonna get with. And he ended up with my Latina but very much white passing mom. And I guess I never heard any full stories, but there was definitely an implication from her that caused a little bit of friction, even among the supposedly not even a little bit racially divided Jehovah's Witness community. So,
Wow.
yeah.
So the reason I was curious about this is because Rudy, you were formerly part of Jehovah's Witnesses. I was formerly Mormon, and there is a lot of
Cult
marrying very young in the Mormon church, especially for the young singles who go to BYU and end up dating for the purpose of trying to date and marry a returned missionary. And there is so much of a emphasis on maintaining a strong appearance, especially especially when you're going to church functions, right? You want to present the happy family, and you want to present, oh look, I was able to find a partner at 20. What's wrong with you? It's never explicitly spoken that way, but that's what the idea is. If you made it through BYU all 4 years and got your degree but couldn't find anybody to marry, what happened? Right. And there's a definite a stigma attached to why have you been single for as long as you have. And then once you are there, as you pointed out, that whole I don't believe in divorce, where a friend of mine who is recently going through a divorce, the question that was asked was not, how can we support you in your decision, but why couldn't you maintain that marriage? Like,
Oof.
and I'm getting from the reactions that you guys have heard this kind of thing before, where the blame then is on the, why did you call it quits? Why did you give up on this? And instead of the questions we should be asking, it's like, what can we do to help? What really happened behind closed doors that we're not aware of?
Yeah, there's within the Jehovah's Witness community, it's weird because I grew up with like very conflicting messages when it comes to like getting married early. Like there was talking points saying like, take your time, you'll find the right person eventually, and there's no rush because in paradise you're gonna live forever, so who cares if you get married now anyway. But at the same time, there were like that's what was said at the platform. In practice, I knew people that got engaged after dating for 6 months and got divorced like a year later. You're also not supposed to divorce as a Jehovah's Witness, but yeah, young marriages. So it's kind of inevitable. I feel like I'm getting off track now. I'm sorry.
No, that's interesting. I'm glad you kind of shared that too, because I know with my background in the Christian faith, it wasn't so much a stronghold of getting married young. It's just very fervent, especially in the Black church, that or at least, I won't say all, but at least certain small groups, that marrying within your race and making sure that they are Christian as well is absolute. And then one issue I do have, and I haven't been able to kind of listen in because my sister is presently going through this. Premarital counseling is a thing where you have to have so many various sessions prior to that pastor or preacher marrying you. My mom, I don't know if my mother went through it her first marriage, but with her second marriage she did. But since they were both widows, they only had that one session since they had experience with marriage. And mind you, they didn't lose their first marriage because of divorce. Both lost their first marriage because of the death of their spouse. So,
Wow.
but yeah. So with now my sister's going through her sessions, I don't know how many, where they do it once a month for like an hour with the preacher. Not sure or absolutely knowledgeable of what the questions are, but it's definitely, to my understanding, is rooted as to it being God accepted, how you would go about an issue with your spouse, and how would you pray together, how would you present yourself to your church, and how will you involve your kids. And I'm like, how is this good marital counseling in regards to how they will make their relationship last or work, because, and then to back that with, as long as you keep praying for God to keep your family together, then you yourself as a godly woman or as a godly man need to keep that family together no matter what. It's
Yeah.
crazy. So that's a stickler for me.
So I had a question for you, Jenna, regarding your work in healthcare. You said you were in healthcare, and then we'll touch on this really quick, and then we'll get to our calls. We know there are glaring inequalities in healthcare access. How do we see these inequalities show up around sexual health?
Oh, yeah. Again, my sisters, I myself, my sister and my mother are nurses. My sister actually works in the OBGYN department for women's health. I myself work in health education surrounding around weight management, but I still have, background knowledge is working in that department and various others. But with, from what I have heard through my congregation growing up, what I have learned for myself and what I have learned and throughout the history of Black people and, healthcare. Obviously, we have strong issues and with it, but the treatment towards, especially Black women alone, is it's a glaring difference in how their care is given and how they can access that care. Is a clear difference from other from our white counterparts. So the idea that Black people in general and a Black woman in general is seen as strong and tough when we express pain or we express something wrong with us, it's written off very quickly versus our white counterparts. And so we're not given or being met with the same type of treatment or care or following care as the other. So it's no surprise to me that when we are met with unintentional pregnancy, or we have higher rates of cervical cancer or higher rates of breast cancer or higher issues and rates of everything involving our reproductive health, that the access there is lacking and the actual fairness of following care and actually addressing that said woman's need is failing. So yeah, and the fact that also, in addition to that, just to relate it to the religious aspect, because we often are, myself and my mom and sister are met with this question often, as far as where the idea of just praying about it, just keeping it and praying about it, because since we have such a disconnect and such a issue with healthcare for Black people in general, we hold on to the standard or stereotypical standard of Black people holding on to their faith and just praying about it and ask God to just heal my body, and if let it be, if I get over this cancer, fine, if I do, fine too. But just letting it go and let God is also dangerous too, because we are not actively advocating for our health. And when you fail to do that, even for yourself, especially if that said provider is not doing it for you, then you're doing more injustice to yourself than anyone else can do for you.
See, this is what happens when you have someone who's used to working with nonprofits coming in to do secular sexuality. Because my mind goes to the current events questions and the government questions and all that, and we often forget. I often forget. It's like, you know what? We're supposed to be talking about the religious aspects and the sexuality aspects of it, and not just the legislation. So I'll get that right by the next time I get on here. But we have another call on the docket. Let's go ahead and. Let's go ahead and take another call here. Keith from Florida. Hi.
Hello, Puck and Rudy and Jenna. How are you guys tonight?
Doing
good.
That's good. I honestly have. I grew up religiously, like I'm sure most of you, all of you guys did. All of you guys have said so. And I took the purity culture thing very, very seriously. Like, I'm 33 years old and I'm still a virgin because I fell out of religion so late, and since I just haven't had an appropriate opportunity. And I don't think people understand how terrible it is. I mean, they had me feeling like, watching porn is bad. It wasn't just purity amongst each other. You couldn't even watch porn. You couldn't even do anything with yourself. I got to the point where I was wanting to cry because I couldn't go more than a week without watching porn. And I don't think the world at large really understands. And I suspect there's a lot of people that are feeling trapped like this and just they think that they're abnormal. I know I thought I was abnormal.
When I was a teenager, I had a calendar in my room and I would mark off the calendar with a green check or a red X depending on whether or not I had masturbated that day.
Wow.
Like I was pretty dead. I felt like I was an addict and I needed to be stopped. And I needed to like I was so disappointed when I think the longest I went was like 3 months, all green checks, and then one night I couldn't sleep and I got my red X and I felt so torn up about that. It really fucked with my self-esteem. You are super not the only person that has been there. A lot of people who have experienced religious trauma have been there, and there's a lot of people who don't realize they've been religiously traumatized that have been there and think that that's normal, which I think is even worse, like not even realizing how fucked up that situation is.
Yeah, I thought it was normal. I thought I was the abnormal one.
No,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that there are shows like this that exist that show, and thank you very much for calling and putting some light on this, that a lot of people don't realize how much harm there is and how much pressure there is in young church culture to maintain this level of purity, or as I came to find out, maintain the appearance of the purity. And it makes you feel like the odd one out, and it makes you feel like you can't go up to someone that you should trust and say, I'm struggling with this. And instead of, you talk to us about something like this and you'd probably get nods of understanding. It's like, okay, I understand where you're coming from. Over there, you're more likely to get chastised, and it makes it more difficult to want to come out and talk to these people if you know all you're going to do is get yelled at and told that you didn't pray enough or you weren't pure enough, right? And growing up, I had a lot of my peers in high school come up to me, and we would talk about stuff that they would never be able to talk to about in their church settings, because they needed to maintain that appearance, at least, of being all chaste and pure. And they felt so torn up about even just having the thoughts in the first place. Never mind wanting to act on it, but just, I shouldn't be thinking this. There must be something wrong with me, like you pointed out. And these thoughts are normal. They happen. You're going to get aroused. You're going to find people attractive. You're going to find people attractive that maybe you wouldn't have thought that you would find attractive, but it's there anyway. And then you get thrown into this culture where you're not supposed to have those. So we're not going to talk about it, and we're going to make you feel bad for having it. So thank you for calling attention to this. I'm glad you called us. Jenna, what do you think?
Yes, and I want to look at it on the other end now that I'm going to assume, Keith, you are non-religious now, correct?
Yes, I'm non-religious now, atheist, and trying to become a skeptic and possibly a humanist. We'll see.
We're all trying.
Yeah. And I guess I'm going to try and formulate this as a question, but I'm just kind of putting it out there and you can kind of answer it however willingly that you want to. Because on the opposite end, whether you are still a believer or not, and given the age that you are, and you have freely expressed that you are still a virgin, have you also, now that you're out of this, on this end, been met, given your age, that, oh, you're still a virgin, what's wrong with you?
Yes, definitely. People don't understand. And not only do I get that, but with my friends that I have now that are, I don't think any of them would go as far as regularly adopting the atheist label, but they're definitely secular.
Mm-hmm.
They don't think it's a big deal. They really don't care about it at all, and they seem to think it's weird that I do. And yet, whenever I talk to anybody about it outside of my small friend group, oh, you're a virgin? That's so weird. And I get weird looks, and sometimes they then treat me like I'm a weird thing. And it's like, I don't mind being viewed as weird, but I want to be viewed as weird for my sense of humor, not for that.
Right.
Sounds like you picked good friends if they're not giving you shit for something so superfluous. I'll just say that to start with. Sounds like you've got good friends if they don't give a shit, because really, I don't even like using the term still a virgin. You don't ever have to stop being a virgin. There's no requirement. It's not a rite of passage. It's not like something you've got to do to be a person. Like, oh,
Right.
you're an adult and you still haven't done the sex? You haven't done a sex yet? Well, when are you going to be an adult? When are you going to? You don't have to. I mean, I'm not saying that you necessarily like. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with wanting to. I'm just saying the idea that there is a requirement to not be a virgin at some point is just arbitrary. It's not true.
Let me say, one of the worst experiences of my life is being looked down on by a 20-year-old college girl who was part of our regular friend group for a while for being a virgin. Oh, you don't know what you like. What the hell does that mean? Oh, I don't know my sexual preferences just because I haven't had sex? What the hell? And that's
I'm glad they are a former member of the friend group. That was probably a good idea to yeet that one right out of the circle.
Yeah.
No, it's an unfortunate amount of pressure that you get. So and that's one of the other dangers of purity culture is like not just the pressure not to do anything, but the pressure of you should have done something by now.
Just the idolizing of sex in general, just the making it a big deal. Like, nobody says that they're a virgin about skydiving if they've never skydived, and people aren't going to be like, you've never skydived? You're 30. You haven't skydived yet? Like, it's just not a thing that we do about anything else, really.
Yeah.
We
don't.
Yeah.
Being in Southern California, I'm a virgin to snow. I never touched it. I've never.
You've never touched
had it
snow, you fucking weirdo.
I know.
Can't believe you.
Snowball? What's that?
I ran away from Maine to Florida to get away from that stuff.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Except Florida, you have your own set of natural disasters down there that I don't even want to come close to dealing with. Keith, thank you very much for calling, and we're glad that you brought to light some things that we're very happy to talk about and that we should talk about. You know what? I'm glad you feel you're among friends and that you can talk to us and be open with us, and that you feel comfortable in the setting. That means we're doing our job. We're doing the right things over here. So thank you very much, Keith.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a relief to speak about it. Have a good one.
Good night.
You too.
We're glad. Thank you.
What I can't believe we're already 80 minutes in. Every time these shows come up, it's like I was so nervous. It's like this is my very first secular sexuality show. I don't know what but then first of all, being among you guys is wonderful because I've done shows with both of you before. So thank you.
Yeah.
And I kind of dragged this show into the nonprofits direction with the questions I had. That's my fault. So next time you guys are on nonprofits, feel free to drag some of the Thursday night into that.
I'm going to bring up next time we have nonprofits. If I can bring up polyamory, I'm going to. Just like if I can find a way to sneak it in, I'm gonna.
Watch the nonprofits every Sunday at 3 p.m. Central Time.
We are all nonprofits as well. So if you want to see us again, watch the nonprofits.
So Jena, where can people find you?
Oh boy. Well, I'm famously, well, there you go. There's my follow card. You can find me on facebook.com/BeckFemaleAtheist. I'll be in some amount of time putting out some content. You can follow me just recently. I have a Twitter at Jena_BFA. I do am active on the atheist community of Discord fan server. That's where I've gotten my start and my comeuppance in the atheist community as a moderator there. So a lot of you are familiar with me there. I also run my own private channel, or not really private, but public channel with my best friend Justin Nelson, who's also admin on the ACD server. We're known as the International Free Thinkers, so you can search us on our YouTube channel by that name. And we also have our own Discord at tiny.cc/ifdc.
For those of you who have not yet explored the wonderful world of Discord, #best platform. It is a wonderful medium for engaging with a number of like-minded people in a number of different ways. There's different chat rooms in there about different topics, so you don't have to keep track of one long conversation like a Facebook group. They even have voice channels and video sharing if you'd rather have a video call. So please check out Discord and check out our Discord at tiny.cc/ACA Discord.
And don't forget, we're going to be in there in a few minutes for the after show. So join us there in just a few minutes if you want to. This was wonderful.
This is wonderful.
Wonderful.
I feel like I can ramble.
I know. I
I
want to
love it.
ramble, but it's
And
like,
there's so much, just like when we do the nonprofits together, there's so much we are leaving on the cutting room floor. Unfortunately, I wanted to get into homophobia within the Black community so bad. I wanted to go there so bad, but that would be a whole other at least half-hour long conversation. But hey, it's there. We mentioned it at least.
Yeah. Next time. Next time, for sure.
Support us on Patreon if you would be so kind. This show is a nonprofit. We're not getting any of this money. Promise you. It's not going to us. It's going to keeping this show and others like it running. At patreon.com/secular sexuality. Any closing thoughts from y'all?
I am glad that shows like this exist that show people like some of the colors that we had, that these conversations can be normalized, and that there are people out here who will understand what it's like growing up in purity culture and what the harms are. And the best thing that I get out of this is that we should be encouraging these conversations. Come out here and have them with us. Email us, leave us a voicemail, check out our Discord and engage with us. Jena and I were on there just about every day looking at what do people want to talk about. Keep these conversations going, because the more you have them, the more you're going to feel comfortable having them, and the more comfortable other people are going to be having them with you. When you go out there confidently being able to talk about issues, it's going to make it much more normalized, and we will show people by example what the harms are of maintaining purity culture.
Absolutely. Just to piggyback on that, it's good to have these conversations, and I can only share as much as I know from my own experience, and I have learned and grown just by getting your perspective, Rudy, and your perspective, Puck, because I'm just a Black female atheist. But I can only tell you what I have learned and grown and have educated myself on just based on my medical background. But having discussions like this, continuing that conversation, albeit very civil and respectfully, we can all grow and learn and critically think.
Awesome. Before we head out, let's thank the crew. Let's get the crew cam up there. We love these people. These people are our people. Oh, Martin's got his cat.
Hello. Woodhouse does all the work. I already know.
He really is the brains of the operation. What's Martin even doing? I mean, oh, look at that baby. Oh, now I wish my cat was in here, but I can't let my cats in this room because they chew on all the wires. And by they, I mean one of them. One of my cats is super well behaved, but one of them is just, yeah. Well, now that we're talking about pussies anyways, I'd love to remind you all in the audience to give yourselves a big old orgasm, or better yet, give somebody else one. Bye. Good night.